going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, I have the 1023E pulled into my shed. It's now about 3 days after I made that stump bucket video. I wanted to get making this video pretty quickly because I know a lot of you guys thought I was getting a new tractor, and that wasn't the case. This is actually my father's tractor. This is a 1023E. He bought this tractor brand new in 2014 or 2015. It's been a really good, reliable tractor for him. He takes really good care of it. Doesn't have a lot of hours on it. I think it's got about 380 hours on it. You know, it's not many hours, but you know, it's been treating him really good. He hasn't had any issues with it whatsoever. And this tractor actually holds special meaning to me, which I don't even think my father knows this, but this is the tractor that started it all for me when I was just getting into tractors and equipment. He got this, like I said, in 2014, 2015. And since I live so close to them, I would actually use the tractor quite often to do my own work at my house, and I would also help him do work at his house. And I'll tell you what, since the very first time that I sat my butt in the seat, I knew in my head that I was going to want to operate equipment. Now, before operating equipment, I used to be an automotive mechanic, and I was doing that every day. I did that most of my life. Started when I was 18 years old, and after a while I just got burned out from working on cars, and I really wasn't happy doing what I was doing anymore. I was working 14 hours a day in a dark, grungy garage. I was always the type of guy that loved to get outside and do yard work and be out in the sun, but being a mechanic was what I always did. It's what I went to school for, and for the longest time, because I was good at it, I figured I had to stay there and keep doing it. It started out as a passion and a hobby for me, but slowly after a while I just got burned out from it. So not long after my father got this tractor and I started using it, I found out just how powerful and useful a small subcompact tractor like this could be. I just kind of fell in love with the idea of having one, and I put it in my head that someday I was going to get one of these tractors and I was going to do landscaping jobs, and I was going to teach myself and just kind of figure it out. So after a while I actually told my family that I wasn't going to be a mechanic anymore, and they actually looked at me like I was crazy because they knew I was a good mechanic, but they didn't understand why I wanted to just completely switch passions. And they even asked me, they said, "Are you sure you're gonna like doing something different?" I said, "I really don't know, but if I don't try something new, I'll never know." And to this day, I still love turning wrenches. I pretty much just got burned out from working on automobiles, and luckily I have a job now that allows me to do both. So anyway, like I said, this is the tractor that kind of started it all for me. The reason this tractor is actually here today is because my father wants to get a grapple. He was asking me which grapple do I think is the best for the type of work that he does, and he also wanted to know which third function kit he should go with. So as far as grapples go, I told him that the root rate grapple was probably the best grapple for him and his application. And as for the third function or diverter kit, I told him that most guys with the John Deere 1 series are running the Artillian Diverter Valve Kit. I've seen this kit installed before. Actually, Tractor Time with Tim has an install on this kit, and they're fairly easy to install. They're actually easier to install than a third function valve, because all they're doing is they're tapping into your main loader hydraulic valve, and it's basically just diverting it. You flip a switch and it diverts that fluid through a manifold, and once you let go of the switch, it closes it and it just continues to go through your regular dump curl feature or whatever you have it on. So I told him that the Artillian kit is probably his best bet. That's what most guys go with. It's an easy install, the price is right, and it's a very good, reliable kit. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be installing an Artillian Diverter Valve Kit on a John Deere 1023E. So I know it's a little bit different for our channel, and I know it's not something that we normally do on my channel, but you know, I actually like variety. I do think Kubota makes some of the best equipment out there, but John Deere, honestly, I think they're right there with them. And I don't mind having other tractors on my channel. It gives me something different to do, and it allows you guys to see other equipment as well. Even though I'm mainly a Kubota channel, I know I got a lot of subscribers that have 1023Es, 1025Rs, so I'd like to help them guys out as well. So let me go ahead and pull a diverter valve kit out, and I'll show you guys what's inside. All right, guys, I just want to show you real quick what's in the kit, and then we're gonna get right to the install because I don't want to do a bunch of talking anymore because this video will go on forever. So you got your main hoses coming from your loader, and they're already connected to your block. Now this block is where your grapple will connect to. And you got these hoses here, which I believe go back to the diverter valve. Then you've got these short hoses right here, and I believe these go from your factory hydraulic manifold to the diverter valve. So as you can see, it's a very simple kit, much simpler than a true third function kit, which ties into your Power Beyond. And because this is just a diverter kit, it's much simpler to install. Lastly, over here, you got your electrical. So you get your switch that goes to your loader valve or your loader stick. And you've got a fuse in here. You got plenty of zip ties, nice big fat beefy zip ties, so that's cool. Nice waterproof, watertight plug connectors here. So it looks like a pretty easy kit. You're just tying this to power and ground. You can use fuse power if you want, or you can just tie it right to your battery. Overall, it looks like a very simple kit to install. So I'm gonna start right here at step 2. Because step 1 is to rest your loader on the ground, which mine already is. So we're gonna go right to step 2 here, which is removing the zip ties and the sleeving, I believe, from your factory hydraulic hoses. Alright guys, so the very first step I'm going to be doing here is removing these two upper lines. Now I'm on the right side of the tractor. This is where all your hydraulic lines come up against the loader here. We're going to be disconnecting these two upper hydraulic hoses where the rubber hoses meet the steel lines here. So you may have to cut these zip ties and pull the sleeving down so that you can access these nuts here to crack these lines loose. Once you do that, we're going to be coming down here and we're gonna disconnect the black hydraulic coupler here and the yellow coupler beneath it. So once we disconnect them, we'll be able to pull these two hoses right out of the sleeving here, and we'll be moving on to the next step. All right, so once you get your sleeving pulled back, you'll be able to get to these fittings here. You're gonna need a 3/4 and a 13/16 wrench. 13/16 is gonna go on the rubber hose end, and the 3/4 is gonna go on a steel lined end. You need to make sure you're holding it steady so that you don't bend these steel lines, because they're just aluminum lines. And if you bend them, you're gonna have problems getting everything back together. And before you loosen these lines up all the way, make sure you have a drain pan handy. I'm actually gonna set mine up here on the tire if I can. Okay, so I've got this one loose. Actually came apart real easy. I'll go ahead and do the second line here, the very next line down. It's a little tight, but you can get your wrenches in there. The lines really aren't tight at all. Once you crack them loose, you can spin them off by hand. Okay, so there's the second line. Now we're gonna go ahead and get down by the loader manifold there and disconnect the other two lines and pull them through the sleeving. Okay, now we're down here at the loader manifold. We're gonna go ahead and remove this top line here, which is the black one. Now we're gonna disconnect the yellow one right below it. Now what we're gonna do is just pull both lines right through the sleeving here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we've got these hoses completely out of the way. You're gonna wanna hang on to these hoses because if you ever remove your diverter valve, you're gonna have to put these hoses back in. So you're just gonna wanna find a nice spot to hang on to these. And make sure to cap the ends so you're not getting dirt and debris in these in case you ever have to use them again. Alright guys, so once you've got them two lines removed, the new lines are not gonna be going back in the sleeving. So what you're gonna do is get this sleeving back up where it was at. So in this case, it should be just behind the threaded ends of the hydraulic hoses here. So I'm gonna put one zip tie here. You're gonna be using two 8-inch zip ties that come in the kit. Okay, so we'll put one here, and you're gonna wanna put the last zip tie right on the end here. I'm gonna pull the sleeving down as far as I can. It should be down by the couplers here. You wanna leave yourself a little bit of room. That way you can get your hydraulic couplers back on. So I'm gonna leave mine about 6 inches, 8 inches off the couplers there. Okay, now we can move on to the next step, which is mounting the diverter valve. So at this step, they want you to mount the diverter valve. It's supposed to be on the inside of your loader frame here. So you want it sitting on this side, and you want the black solenoids facing towards the operator. So let me get that out of the package, and we'll see how this goes on there. All right, guys, so here's the diverter valve kit. These are the solenoids I was talking to you about that need to be facing the tractor. Check out the mounting system they used on this. This is a really unique mounting system. I actually think it's brilliant. It's got two very long 1/4-inch bolts that slide through the diverter block itself. You got one on each side, and it goes through, and it's got this nice little rubber mount here, which will hook right on the edge of your loader frame on either side. And then when you tighten the bolt down, it's just gonna tighten these down like a clamp. So these are gonna slide. And what that also allows for is for you to float this diverter valve. So if you want it in a little bit or out a little bit, or even if you need to rotate it a bit, you can. So I think that's a really smart system. I've actually never seen a mounting system like that before. So very cool. It's also got this nice little soft rubber pad here, so it won't scratch up your loader arm. And it probably also helps for vibrations too. It keeps this thing from getting vibrated and maybe coming loose. So very cool system. So let's see if we can get this thing mounted up. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the bottom one started first at the top here. And then I'm gonna slide it down the frame. And as I do so, it should tighten up. And they want you just to mount this thing loosely for now. So what we wanna do is just basically snug this thing up just so it sits there and rests there, because I'm sure we'll have to adjust its exact position later on down the line here. So I'm just sliding this thing down until it's snug because the frame does widen towards the bottom. So right there, it's pretty tight. The top one's kind of loose, so I'm gonna go ahead and snug the top one up. This is an 11mm, so I got an 11mm socket and wrench. Now these nuts that they're using on these are nylon nuts, so they won't vibrate loose on you. Once you get this thing nice and snug, you should never have to worry about it loosening up on you. I don't think the thing's going anywhere. And see how this whole body will slide on here? I just think that's an awesome idea. Really great invention with this mount. All right, so now we got this thing nice and stable, it ain't going nowhere. Now we can go ahead and run our other hydraulic lines. So here's a quick shot of the diverter valve mounted up. Like I said, it may go up or down depending on how these hoses line up to it. And now what we need to do is get the two new hoses that come with the kit. And those hoses will be getting mounted from the front end of your loader with the block. And they're gonna be running alongside the loader frame here, and we'll be connecting them into the block here. Okay guys, so now it's time to install the hydraulic hoses. After reading the manual, we're not gonna be installing the long hoses for the loader out to the diverter valve. We're actually gonna be installing the hoses that go from your loader manifold to your diverter valve. So these are gonna be the shorter hoses. And on the one end, you're gonna have a pigtail. So these are gonna be the ones we're installing first. But before we do that, we have to pull off the boots from the old lines that we took off. Basically the dust caps, and we'll be putting them on these new lines here. Okay, so here's our old lines. So we just gotta remove these dust caps. Now these should just be on there pretty loosely, actually like a little loop system here. So they come off real easy. Let's push this through and go ahead and pull it off of the hydraulic fitting. Okay, now that we've got our old boots off, we can go ahead and install them onto the new lines here. Pull this little baggie off the end here. And if you guys see, the lines are actually labeled. So here on this tag, it says yellow cap, and on this other one, it says black cap. So you can't get confused. So we'll go ahead and put the yellow one on the yellow, and we'll put the black on the black. Okay, let's go ahead and get these installed. Okay guys, so what they want you to do is install the quick couplers first. I'm not gonna do that because I don't wanna get dirt in the open ends here. So I'm gonna install these ends of the diverter valve first. You can see here, these are labeled. We got P1 and P2. So I'm gonna go ahead and install these at the corresponding ports on the block, which is gonna be actually the ports on the back side here. So let me reposition the camera and we'll get these installed. Okay, so I don't know how well you guys can see it, but here stamped on the block is P1. And on the lower one here is P2. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull off the cap for P2. I'm gonna do that one first as it's the lower one. It'll be harder to get to. We'll do that one first, then we'll do the P1. I'll go ahead and lay these hoses right over top of the floor mat. My P2 hose, which is this guy right here. And these are all GIC fittings. These don't have to be extremely tight. Should be good. You know, the size of these is actually an 18 millimeter. It specifically says in the manual, do not over tighten these. Obviously these are just going into an aluminum block, so if you over tighten these you can crack the block. So like I said, they're JIC fittings, just snug them up and you should be all set. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and do P1, which is this guy here. It should be plenty tight. All right, so now that we got these two ends on, we can go ahead and install the two quick couplers here. We'll install them on our loader valve. So go ahead and slide this hose back. Just follow the other hoses, the factory hoses, and it'll lay actually right over top of them. We're gonna go ahead and do the yellow one first, since that's the lower one. I'll tell you what, the Kubota BX lines are definitely a lot easier to get to, that's for sure. Okay, there's that one. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now our short hoses are completely connected. We've got them connected from the loader valve all the way up and into our diverter valve. All right, so now what they want us to do is to grab this little Y connector here. It's got two pigtails on the end. This comes off the top end of those hydraulic hoses we just installed. So they want us to just bring these around and go ahead and plug them into the solenoids here. Now, if you get this wrong and you find that the diverter valve acts backwards from what you want it, all you got to do is pull these out and switch them around. So we're just going to plug them in for now and see what happens when we go and use it. So there's one, and there's two, and that's a nice watertight fit. So you can see this wire is completely out of the way where it's at. So that's all set now. So now I think what we're going to be doing is moving on to the long hoses that go from the front end loader back to the side of this diverter valve here. Now we're at the stage where we're installing the last set of hydraulic hoses. We've got two long hoses that go from the front of the loader, which has got this manifold on it, and the other end here goes to the diverter valve. Now within the sleeving here, we've got two shorter hoses, and these can actually be pulled out of the sleeving to make assembly easier. So what I'll probably do is pull the sleeving off just so I can work with two hoses at a time instead of trying to wrestle with all four of these hoses. So these two short hoses are going to be going to the corresponding fittings on the block, and then the other ends of these two short hoses are going to be going to the hard steel lines that we disconnected in the very beginning. These are labeled dump and curl, so what you're going to want to do is follow up your hard lines and make sure that you're putting these on the correct lines. So if you follow this line and it goes to the curl, then you want to keep the curl on that one, and so forth with the other one. So we'll have to follow these lines to make sure we get this right. Otherwise your curl and dump is going to operate backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out of the sleeving now. As you can see, the sleeving just slides right off. And now we can just work with these two short hoses. So let's go ahead and connect these two ends on the block, and then we're gonna connect these two ends to the steel lines here. All right guys, so on these hydraulic lines, you're gonna notice you got two straight couplers on this end, and then on this end, you got two 90s. So the end with the 90s, these are gonna be going to the hard steel lines that we disconnected in the beginning. These two straight ones here, these are gonna be coming right off of the diverter valve itself. As you can see here on a diverter valve, we've already got 90s coming off that, so they didn't have to put them on these hydraulic hoses here. I'm gonna start with the hose that says B1 on it. I'm gonna do that because it's on the lower end of the manifold, and again, it'll be easier for me to access now. All right, so the correct fitting for this B1 hose is gonna be this one right here. It is the second one down on the back side of the manifold. Go ahead and thread in the straight end here. Grab my 18mm, we'll just snug this up. Okay, now you don't want to snug that up all the way just yet. Just kind of get it lightly snug. That way this will still move. And you want to keep it a bit loose so that you can figure out exactly where this hose needs to lay to go to one of these hard lines here. I got to figure out exactly which one of these hard lines is for the dump function. So let me go and figure that out now. All right, guys, so here are the two hard lines that we disconnected in the beginning. So we need to figure out which one is curl and which one is dump. So I've already figured it out. The bottom one here is dump and the top one is curl. So basically what you want to do is follow this top line. We follow this one back. And as you come down here, they go into this cover plate here. And the top line up there is actually this front line here. As you come up over here, you could follow it up. And then you could see exactly where it goes into the cylinder. So this one goes into this hydraulic hose here, which comes down and goes to the bottom of the cylinder. So this line would be curled because it's pushing the hydraulic fluid upward, which would be pulling back the cylinder. And just the opposite with the curl comes out right here, pushes the hydraulic fluid down, which dumps the cylinder. So since the hose here we had was B1, on the other end here of B1 is dump. So the dump cylinder is going to be the lower line here, or the yellow one in this case. Okay, so here's the line we just connected. So now what I need to figure out is exactly how this gets mounted to here, because you can see I got an elbow coming off of this. So I'm assuming that this hose comes straight up out of the diverter valve here. You can see it's coming straight up, and that puts this elbow straight upside down. And when that happens, it goes just like this here. And you can see this hose is straight up in the air. So it gives it a nice loop here at the top so that when the loader comes up, it has plenty of room and doesn't stretch the hydraulic hose. And then when it comes down, it rests just like this here. I'm assuming that's how it goes. I don't really see any other way it can go. But before we thread this in here, we need to install the other hose, because then we gotta put the sleeving back over this and combine it with the two longer hydraulic hoses before we finish threading these in. So now we're gonna be hooking up the A1 hose. It's gonna go right here on this upper fitting. And then just leave this loose for now. That way we can maneuver this hose around, same as we did with this other hose here. So that when we get ready, we can put this in the sleeving, get everything exactly where we want it, and then we'll snug this down. You can see how these are gonna curl straight upwards, and both of them are gonna get hooked directly into these two lines right here, just like so. All right, guys, now we're over here at the front side of the tractor. We're gonna be installing the longer hydraulic lines connected to this hydraulic manifold at the end. This hydraulic manifold has just a regular worm clamp on it, and it's got like a nice little sleeving here so it doesn't scratch the paint. So this is just going to be getting mounted right to the top of the cross member here, and it's going to be going over your protective cover for your hydraulic lines. So it's just going to sit like this. Probably going to want to have it about here, almost in line with the right side of your grill guard. That seems like a good location for it. And the rubber hydraulic lines are just going to go right up alongside the loader frame, following the steel lines. So let's go ahead and get this block mounted, and then we'll run these lines up to the diverter valve. So this is going to get mounted right around here. Let's see if I can get this worm clamp started here. Okay, we've got it started. Just gonna get it snug for now, and then we'll get it into its proper position. Okay, now it's starting to get snug. So you guys see, I've got it directly above basically the right side of the grill guard. It's more or less in line with the bottom mount here, so you can see how that looks. I think that's a good spot for it, because in the pictures they show it pretty off-centered, but not all the way off to the end. And this will also give you a little bit more room with your hoses running up. And I'd rather have my hoses a little bit more loose than tight. So I think this is a good spot for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this clamp down the rest of the way, and we'll get to mounting the hoses up on the other end. All right, so now I'm gonna grab these hoses here, and we wanna make sure that we get underneath the loader level gauge here. Get underneath this. I'm gonna stay over top of this curl cylinder hydraulic hose here. Actually gonna go right behind it. That'll give me a nice tie down point with the zip ties. Then I'm gonna go underneath this hydraulic hose for the curl cylinder as well. And I'm also gonna go underneath the bracket for the loader level indicator. Do them just like that. That looks pretty good there. And we should just be able to lay these right alongside here, and we'll zip tie them to the hard lines here. All right, hopefully from this angle you can kind of see the way I came up here. I'm just going to be laying them right alongside these steel lines here that we disconnected in the beginning. They'll be getting zip tied something like this here. And then these two ends here are just going to be getting wrapped around and going back into the diverter valve. So the ends of these lines here are labeled A2 and B2. And then we got an A2 and B2 on the bottom. And I almost forgot, before we get these lines connected, we got to put that sleeving on. So let me get that done now. All right, so the sleeving we're going to put over these two short lines first. Okay, so I got the sleeving on the two short lines. Now we're gonna go ahead and fish these two long lines that we just got done running. We'll fish them back down all the way through it. Then they should come out on the bottom side here, which is where they're gonna make their last two connections. Okay, there we go. There, now we've got them pulled through the sleeving. Now we can go ahead and make our connections. So again, I'm going to do B2 first. Okay, that's on there. Now we can go ahead and do B1, which is this last remaining fitting here. I'm going to leave them loose as well for now. You can see all these lines are loose. That way I can get this group of hoses laying exactly how I want it before I tighten all these fittings down. So I would advise you do the same thing. Just leave all these loose for now until you get them exactly where you want them. And then once you got everything zip tied and tight, you can go ahead, come back through here and tighten all these fittings up. All right, guys, so now you can kind of see how this is coming together. So here's that wrap that we just put on there. Those 2 short lines and 2 long lines both intersect and come through here. They come up, and then you got your 2 short lines that split off right here. And then we're gonna be going to our hard lines right there and there. So now all we gotta do is get these last 2 remaining lines hooked up. And once we get everything snugged up and tightened down, we should be all set with the hydraulic end of this diverter valve kit. And then the only thing left to do is to do the electronic side of it. So that won't be too hard. I know we do gotta remove this floor here, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So let's go ahead and finish installing these 2 lines and we'll go from there. Okay guys, so you wanna position these 2 lines in such a way to where your elbows are facing up. As you can see here, they're both facing up. That way both these hoses can get bent straight backwards and connect to these 2 lines right here. The first one I'm gonna do here is a dump valve. So that's labeled dump. That is going to be that bottom one that we talked about before with the yellow zip tie on it. Now we just got our last valve here, which is the curl valve. That wasn't too bad. All right, now it's starting to come together a little bit. You guys kind of see how it's going to go. Got our 2 long lines here. They're going to get zip tied alongside the hard lines, and they're just going to flow basically with these guys here, just like this. And then all your lines are going to come up like this in a group. They're going to come back around into your third function or a diverter valve. So now what I got to do is go ahead and zip tie these. I'm going to start from the bottom here and just pull up my slack and bring as much slack up this way as I can. And I'll probably zip tie it right up until this point here. And then I'll throw a couple on this as well. You're supposed to put 1 on each end of the sleeving here. So you want to put 1 here and 1 on the other end. Once you get all that done, you can go ahead and tighten all these fittings down. So let me go ahead and do all that stuff now. I'll get back with you guys. All right guys, so I got all the hydraulic lines zip tied. So starting down here, see this is mounted nice and tight. I've got a zip tie here. I followed up the loader frame right here. I went under all the other hydraulic hoses. See, it comes up right here, goes underneath again, this hydraulic line, underneath all this bracketry here. Comes up, I got a zip tie here, follows up along here. This is where it goes into that sleeving. You want to put these zip ties kind of loose because you don't want them real tight because you want these hoses to be able to move within that sleeving. So I got one there, and then this comes down, loops around, and I have a zip tie right here. So that's all done now. I've got the block nice and tight. It no longer slides back and forth. What they want you to do is slide this block all the way forward and then tighten it down, and that gives you the best position to give as much room on these hoses as you can. I got all these lines all tightened up. I've got the 2 lines over here tightened up, and you can see how those elbow up. Just make sure when you tighten these up, you keep these away from each other. You don't want these rubbing and chafing on one another. So make sure you're separating these as you're tightening them down. But yeah, that's about it. So all the hydraulics are now done. It's all complete. So now the only thing left to do is to hook up the switch. So there'll be a switch that we get mounted on the loader valve here. We'll run a wire down through the boot here. We're gonna have to pull the floorboard up so that we can run the wire down underneath the floorboard and into the battery there. And once you get power and ground for the battery, you're gonna have one more plug that comes out this way and gets plugged into this last little plug here. So that's gonna be coming up in part 2 of this video, so keep an eye out for that. I'm gonna get this video uploaded hopefully before the end of the weekend here, and then we will have part 2. Hopefully I'll have part 2 done by, I'd say like Monday, Sunday, Monday, I'm hoping. Hopefully by the end of the weekend I'll have them both done. So part 2 is going to be the wiring. Part 1 was all the hydraulics. But yeah, so far I'm really liking this kit. It came together very well. I was going to finish it all in one video, but it's kind of getting long and it's like 11 o'clock at night right now, so I want to get inside. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope it was useful. As always, we'll see you guys in the next one.